And welcome back to the show, everybody. Man, March Madness is here. We're a month away from the Masters. My goodness. The Players' Championship wrapped up. We'll talk about that. Our guest, Matthew Travis, a young guy who I've known a long time, who's a great sports guy in Lake Charles, Louisiana. But I wanted to mention today's broadcast brought to you by Casa de Campo. That's in the Dominican Republic. Pete Dye designed 4 golf courses. Teeth of the Dog reopens in December. They're redoing the greens, the tees, the fairways, etc. There's 3 other courses. It's an easy get to, the Dominican Republic, Casa de Campo, and the accommodations and the people, the food, fantastic. So check it out, casadecampo.com. All right, Matthew, welcome into the show, my friend. Longtime sports guy at KPLC Channel 7 in Lake Charles, Louisiana. McNeese State is going back to the dance. Matthew, I know Will Wade, for many of the people, yeah, that's Will Wade. He used to be at LSU. Yeah, and Matthew, he's done a heck of a job at McNeese State.
Not only that, he's playing his alma mater. He went to Clemson. Their assistant head coach, Vernon Hamilton, he's Clemson's all-time steals leader. So it's a big homecoming for them. I'm going with the team to Providence on Tuesday, so it'll be a good game. They have a sour taste in their mouth from that loss to Gonzaga last year, where a lot of people were picking him. Feels kind of like UC San Diego. That was McNeese last year, and they just kind of came out flat and were outsized and outplayed, to be quite frank. But it feels like this year. Last year, it was more getting to the tournament was the goal, and they really enjoyed just being in the tournament for the first time in 22 years. This year, it's, okay, we're here now, we're going to win a game, and it should be a good one. They played phenomenally in the Southland tournament, so I hope they can get a win, but it should be fun up there in Providence.
Yeah, that's going to be neat. You'll be on the road, and of course, Coach Wade's name being mentioned with all sorts of jobs. And you've talked to him about it. I've seen some clips that you've put on X. That's just nature of the beast, right?
Yeah, of course. And NC State, everything I put out on X, they're in my replies saying #Wade to State, and they're begging him. And me being from Charlotte, everyone is texting me trying to figure out who it is. And I interviewed him on Saturday about McNeese, not NC State, but it'll be interesting. He's all about McNeese, and once the season, he's been very candid. Once the season is over, that's when they'll kind of look at everything. But he could be gone. Indiana's another fan base that wants him. Texas is a job that could open if they hire him. Probably not, but it'll be interesting. Will he end up here at McNeese? I think that's where I would put my money on for next year if I had to bet, but it'll be interesting. NC State is obviously appealing, but can they get the money to get Will Wade? It'll be fun, but he's playing his alma mater, and he's focused on one game at a time, and then he'll handle what he has to handle.
Yeah, that's fun when your name's out there, and those are some, I don't know how good the jobs are, but the names are good. Indiana, NC State. I think Texas is obviously, if that comes open, that is a gem of an opportunity, I believe. And Minnesota, they're now open, and there's other jobs. So we'll see what happens with Coach Wade. All right, you have connections. For our audience, obviously McNeese State, you're there, you're covering those guys. You graduated from the University of Alabama. You were there when Coach Oates takes over, and it's amazing what he has done. You grew up in North Carolina. You go to this Duke basketball camp as a kid. You're a Coach K guy. I mean, your loyalties, Matthew. I mean, potentially, if Duke plays Alabama in the regional final, who are you going to root for?
So this question would have been a lot more interesting. So my senior year at Alabama was Coach K's last year. And if Duke didn't lose to to Notre Dame in the first round, Duke and Alabama could have played in the Sweet 16, which would have been bizarre for me because it would have been Coach K's last year and my senior year at Alabama. So that would have been a nightmare. My freshman and sophomore year, I definitely would have cheered for Duke, but now it's all Alabama. I mean, I helped set up the student section 5 hours before games with all the newspapers and everything at Alabama. I went to countless road games. I've been to all but 2 SEC arenas to see Alabama play. So it's definitely Alabama now, but I joked on X last night, and it's a complete nightmare for me. I've said for years that I was worried about it happening because I didn't want to have to choose. And Luke, who we just talked about, he always, any possibility of Duke and Alabama playing, he would always just edge me a little bit on that. But no, I would definitely cheer for Alabama. I'm worried about Alabama-Wisconsin in the Sweet 16 if that's what ends up happening. I think Wisconsin's really hot, minus the loss to Michigan. But, two really good teams. And if Duke has Cooper Flagg back, I don't think there's a team in the country that can beat them.
You mentioned Luke Ratliff, the Huffopotamus, big guy, always wore the plaid jackets like Coach Sanderson used to wear, not Coach Oates wears, and passed away way too soon, April 2nd, 2021. Huge basketball fan at the University of Alabama, a great friend of yours, and he's smiling down with this opportunity in this region. Listen, I'm looking at it right here. Alabama, Robert Morris, not a problem. I think St. Mary's will get by Vanderbilt, and St. Mary's is very good. I think that could potentially be an interesting game against Alabama. But I got Alabama advancing. And Matthew, here you have BYU. If you've seen them play, this is an older team that shoots the three. They're very good, and they'll play your Wisconsin team potentially. I think Alabama BYU is going to be the matchup there in the third round, second weekend of the NCAA tournament.
So you've got BYU over Wisconsin.
Yes.
I think Wisconsin, they've really found it out. That'll be a tough one. BYU's been playing really well, but I just have a gut feeling about Wisconsin. I think John Tonje and John Blackwell, when you have a player averaging 19 points and another one averaging almost 16, it's hard to stop Wisconsin offensively. And BYU, they played a great conference schedule, played Arizona really hard, but I don't know. I like Wisconsin, and if they do get to the Sweet 16, I am worried about Wisconsin versus Alabama. If I weren't an Alabama graduate, I would probably pick Wisconsin, especially with the questions around Grant Nelson. But
yeah,
Wisconsin is strong, and I think Duke, Wisconsin fans are still hurt about the game 10 years ago, the national championship game, the Grayson Allen game, and I think Wisconsin fans would really, really like to see Wisconsin versus Duke. So I don't know. I just have a feeling about Wisconsin they can make some noise, and I hope I'm wrong, being an Alabama graduate once again. But I think they're playing really well.
So you think it'll be a 1-2 Duke Alabama?
That's what I picked. My head says Duke, Wisconsin, but my heart says Duke, Alabama. We went with Duke, Alabama.
All right, so you're going chalk there, and I can understand that. Now let's move on. I thought Houston in the Midwest, very, very impressive and healthy for a change as they go into the NCAA tournament, and that brings in your McNeese team with Clemson. And if McNeese wins a couple of games, I think they're going to wind up with Houston. That'll be interesting. But I just like Houston advancing. I'm looking at the lower half of this bracket. Coach Sanderson this morning poo-pooed me on his radio show. I think Kentucky got a pretty good draw. You play Troy in the first round. Number one, you're a 3 seed. Then you could potentially play Texas or a banged-up Illinois team. I don't know, Matthew. I think Kentucky is going to play in the second weekend.
I completely agree. I have Kentucky playing in the Elite Eight. You mentioned Houston. I have Houston going to the Final Four, but I have Houston over Kentucky. And you talked about Texas. A first 4 team always, ever since they introduced it, a first 4 team always wins. I don't have faith in UNC. Frankly, I don't think they should be in the tournament. West Virginia got snubbed, but at first 4 team always wins. I have Texas, Kentucky, and then in that Sweet 16, it's an interesting matchup because you have Kentucky, Tennessee. Tennessee's been playing well. They're a very good defensive team, but Kentucky beat them twice this season.
Yes.
There's the infamous, it's hard to beat a team 3 times. Someone mentioned that to Will Wade the other night, and he went off on the reporter calling it BS, and they're actually 100% beating a team 3 times. But I have Kentucky getting to the Elite Eight, another chalk kind of region with the 1 versus 3 in the Elite Eight. But I just think Kentucky's playing really well, and I've been really impressed with them this year with Mark Pope taking over. There weren't any expectations for them this season, but they beat Duke in the Champions Classic, and they had a really good SEC schedule. Granted, 14 teams from the SEC went in, so you're going to get banged up and bruised a little bit when you go through that schedule, but I really like Kentucky, like you mentioned. I have them going to the Elite Eight.
All right, in the South, listen, Auburn is really good. And that SEC tournament, as you probably watched a little, it was brutal. It was physical, and Auburn just got beat, which happens in the SEC. But I love their draw. They were talking about Duke has the easiest draw. I mean, Auburn plays Alabama State, then potentially Louisville. And listen, Louisville hasn't. They played Duke the other night in the championship. Hadn't played a ranked team since December the 7th before they lost to Duke. Then potentially UC San Diego, and then Michigan State advances. I don't know. I mean, I think Auburn got a great draw, Matthew.
So this is where you and I completely differ because
Wow.
I have Louisville beating Auburn.
Wow.
And the reason for that is Auburn, while they lost to 3 good teams in Alabama, Tennessee, and Texas A&M, they haven't been playing their best basketball. I think Chad Baker-Mazara is a complete wild card, and he got a little banged up in their semifinal game. And that game is going to be in Lexington, Kentucky. Louisville should have been a 5 or a 6 seed. Pat Kelsey talked about feeling a little snubbed. They should have been playing an 11 or a 12 seed, and instead they're playing a 9 seed as an 8 seed. When was the last time you saw an 8 seed only have 7 losses and finish second in their conference, which is the ACC? Granted, the ACC was very, very down this year, but they're 27-7, and that game is in Lexington, Kentucky. And with the exception of last year, for the last 5 years, so last year being the exception, a 1 seed is lost in the first weekend. I don't see Duke losing in the first weekend. I don't see Florida losing in the first weekend. And Houston is the team that Gonzaga's been to all these Sweet 16s in a row, so they could be the team susceptible. But Auburn is essentially playing a road game at Louisville in Lexington, and I think Louisville has a lot of fire, feeling snubbed as an 8 seed, and I have Louisville getting to the Elite Eight, and that crazy enough. So you and I differ quite a bit there, but you mentioned UC San Diego. I really like that pick. Aniwa Tate Jones, he's been phenomenal. They swept their conference awards, so I have them getting to the Sweet 16 after beating Michigan and A&M. And I have New Mexico in that region as well. Ole Miss knocking off Iowa State. I'm not really an Iowa State believer. They're without one of their best players on top of that. So, but yeah, I have Louisville getting to the Elite Eight. So you and I differ quite a bit on that one.
Well, it's going to be fun. And now let's go west where, they send Florida out, and they very well could be the overall number 1 seed. They're playing that well. But again, I love the way it shakes out for them, although potentially Florida could meet Maryland in the 3rd round. And Maryland is, offensively, they are explosive. And those kind of games can go any direction. Somebody shoots bad, whatever. But I think Florida's going to emerge. And again, I hate to go with chalk, but man alive, St. John's looks really, really good to me, Matthew. They're playing great.
They do. There are 6 coaches in college basketball who've won a national championship. 3 are in that little quadrant with Kansas, Arkansas, and St. John's, with Pitino, Self, and Calipari. So that little quadrant, that'll be in Providence. So I'm excited to see those games. That quadrant is a complete mess. So any one of those 4 teams could get to the second weekend out of there. But if St. John's gets through, they're going to be a tough team to beat. They won the Big East for the first time since 2000. They have a lot of momentum after winning in MSG this past week. But it's going to be really tough to beat Florida for anybody. They destroyed Alabama and Nashville. Just, what was it, 20-something points. I kind of tuned it out after it got out of hand. But it's going to be tough for anyone to beat Florida. I think Derek Queen in Maryland, they're Crab 5, they call them. I think they're going to be a tough out. But I have Florida getting out of this quadrant like you. I have Texas Tech knocking off St. John's, but I've been kind of up and down on that one. But it might be tough for anybody to beat Florida.
I'm hesitant to drink, and I think the world of Coach Pitino, and obviously his record speaks for itself. But UConn was down, and they handled UConn 3 times. Creighton was okay. Marquette is okay. I think they won a Big East conference that wasn't as competitive as it usually is. I think they're very good. But I think they also struggle. I mean, you're talking about Florida and some of these other teams. If you watch Duke play, they can knock down the three-point shot. I'm not sure St. John's has that ability to just outshoot a team. And I think that could be their Waterloo.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, I have two teams from the Big East advancing to the second week or to the second round with UConn and St. John's. Those are the only ones. I have Xavier falling, and I have New Mexico knocking off Marquette. So it was a much weaker conference. It wasn't the Big East of the past couple of years where UConn went through a gauntlet and went on to win the national title. But I mean, for St. John's, they don't care if it was a one bid league. They don't care if it was the Big East and they won it for the first time in 25 years. And I think, I mean, when you win those games in Madison Square Garden, Jay Wright has talked about it. Sometimes those games are tougher to win than second weekend games because it's Madison Square Garden and you're dealing with the Big East tournament. And I think that gives them something a lot of these teams don't have. And it's not going to be like the site is going to be really a factor because they're going to San Francisco, so it's not like it's in Atlanta where the Florida fans will travel or anything like that. So I think St. John's can get there, but like I said, it's Kansas and Arkansas, Calipari and Self. So whoever they face, no matter who the team is, it's going to be a very tough matchup. So they could slip up in that second round, but I don't know. I don't see him losing to Kansas or Arkansas. They've been pretty down. Arkansas got Boogie Flan back, their best player, so they could be better. But, yeah, I have St. John's at least getting to the Sweet 16, and then that Texas Tech game would be a really, really good game, I think.
Yeah, Kansas, Arkansas. Wow, talk about two programs that kind of has limped into the tournament, and whoever loses, what a disappointing year it's going to be. I mean, you can always say, hey, at least we made it to the dance, but come on now. I mean, Arkansas and Kansas. Arkansas with Coach Cal, expectations were obviously much, much higher. Hey, I read your thing on X this morning. Since 2018, 13 seeds or above have won every year. And I'm looking at these 13 seeds, Matthew. Akron, Yale, High Point, Grand Canyon. I mean, I don't know. I just don't see any of those teams. And then you also mentioned the 11 seeds have won every year since 2010. VCU, okay. San Diego, yeah. Drake, I don't know, Matthew. I think we always have upsets, but I just don't see as many this year as in past years. Do you agree or disagree?
Yeah, I completely agree. And listening to everything yesterday, everyone talking about the bracket, I feel like a lot of the years we say this could be the year that all 4 1 seeds get to the
Right.
Final Four, and it's only ever happened once, 2008 being the year, which, granted, this year has, and I think NIL has something to do with that, this year it just feels like there are 4 distinguished best teams in the nation. At times, Duke has been the best team in the country. They played an ACC schedule. At times, Houston has been the best team in the country, and obviously Florida feels like that right now, and Auburn felt like that for a while. But 13 seeds, you mentioned Akron. They're a team I really do believe in. I didn't pick them. It was hard for me to pick them, but like those things happen every year, but there are 4 13 seeds. So which one is it going to be? High Point, they're playing in their first tournament ever. I don't think Purdue, outside of Braden Smith, is all that strong. I think that one, you could have a 13 versus 12 matchup with McNeese versus Akron there, or McNeese versus High Point there. I didn't pick High Point, I picked Purdue, but that one will be interesting. A lot of people are talking about Yale because they just beat Auburn last year in the tournament, and they have a Texas A&M team who's been really hot and beat Auburn on their home floor, or really cold and losing games they shouldn't have, like Texas in their most recent game in the SEC tournament. So they're one a lot of people are picking. I don't really believe in that, and the 11 seeds, I'm not sure. I'm kind of with you on that. I think I picked Texas because the first 4 team always wins, but Drake has been really, really strong. And I did pick Drake over Missouri because you were mentioning Arkansas and Kansas limping into the tournament. Missouri beat Alabama and then essentially lost out on their way to the tournament and looked really, really weak. And Drake has been really strong. I think they have 3 losses on the year. So I picked that one there as an 11 seed. But yeah, to your point, it's been a year of powerhouses. Like the four best teams in the nation have been distinguished as the four best teams in the nation.
I just think, too, 14 SEC teams, a physical conference. If anybody watched the Southeastern Conference tournament, I mean, it was hard to officiate because there was so much physicality in the game. And I just think when the SEC gets in the tournament, Matthew, and you have different officiating crews that haven't called SEC games all year, I mean, some of these key players get into foul trouble early. You sit with 2 fouls early. You pick up that third foul early in the second half. We see it every year. It changes the dynamic of the game, the officiating. Not the officials' fault. It's just, and listen, the SEC teams are warned. Listen, they're going to call it tighter. So we'll see. 14 teams in. Not all 14 are going to advance, obviously. It's been an amazing year. But I just think when the tournament lights come on, we're going to see some SEC teams probably get upset, Matthew, just because things are going to shake out that way. Texas A&M, perfect example. I mean, they foul on virtually every possession. That's just the way they play. Tennessee, same thing. So, and that has hurt Rick Barnes' teams in the past. They've gotten into some foul trouble in key moments. So, I don't know. That's what I'll be watching for. The SEC, man, it's fun to watch them play, but when they play other teams with different officials, could get dicey.
It could, but here's a stat for you. Going into SEC play and non-conference play, this includes South Carolina and LSU, the only teams who didn't make the tournament. Nobody had more than 2 losses in non-conference play. Auburn and Alabama obviously have the number 1 and number 2 strength of records in college basketball. They both have wins over Houston. Auburn beat Purdue. Auburn lost to Duke, but played them tough at Cameron Indoor. So nobody had more than 2 losses. Kentucky beat Duke as well. Nobody had more than 2 losses against these non-conference teams. Granted, that was 4 months ago, and they got beaten up by conference opponents. But they handled non-conference play with ease, and that's kind of when everybody started talking about the SEC is unbelievable because even South Carolina, like Oklahoma, was undefeated going into Southland Conference play, into SEC play, and got destroyed by Alabama right out of the gate. But I have, looking at my bracket now, I have 4 SEC teams going to the Elite Eight. I have Alabama, Kentucky, Florida, 3. Florida, Alabama, and Kentucky going to the Elite Eight. So it'll be interesting. 14 teams, granted, one of them has to go on a run, I think.
Well, I just think Auburn's going to make their way to the Final Four. I think physically they're an imposing team. They suffered some losses here in the last couple of weeks of the season, but it's a roller coaster. I mean, they played at such a high level for so long, and I do think they'll get it back. And I just think from a physicality standpoint, when they walk onto the floor compared to some of these other teams, and they're more athletic. They're just bigger and in many cases more aggressive. So we'll see what happens. That's where I differ with you. I do think Auburn is going to advance to the Final Four. I think Florida will advance to the Final Four. I think Alabama will have an opportunity. Again, Grant Nelson is a key component. The big man injured his leg against Florida. He needs to come back. But the way Alabama plays in a tournament, that wide open style, people just don't see that style. And so we'll see what happens with Nate Oates. I mean, what a run he's been on here the last few years.
Yeah, and from what I've seen, he could possibly be back for the first round. I don't see him playing against Robert Morris, maybe a couple minutes here and there just to get him back on the floor. But that St. Mary's game could be tough. St. Mary's lost to Gonzaga in the WCC title game, but we'll see. And you have Auburn, Florida in the Final Four would be appointment television. That would be just a phenomenal game. So do you have all 4 1 seeds going to the Final Four?
I don't have Duke going, and I know that disappoints you.
Well, does that mean Alabama's going?
Well, I think Alabama's going to get beat in a high-scoring game, potentially by BYU.
Gotcha. So
again,
who's going to the Final Four out of that? BYU?
Yeah, I think they'll be the surprise team, the outlier. Because there's always somebody, right?
You mentioned my tweet a second ago. Another one, at least 1 4 seed has made every Final Four since 2010. So 1 4+ seed. So BYU would be your 4 seed to make, or 4+ seed to make the Final Four. I don't have a 4. I have all 1s and 2s, a lot of chalk, kind of based on what we've been talking. I have Michigan State coming out of the South, Florida, Duke, and Houston. The Houston one is kind of the one I'm least confident in, because I think if Clemson gets by McNeese, I think they beat Purdue with ease, and that Clemson-Houston game could be a tough one for Houston, I think, just because of the size Clemson has. But yeah, I have a lot of chalk. It'll be a fun tournament because I know I could be wrong. The very first game, Louisville is the first game of the tournament, and I have them going to the Elite Eight out of a 8-9
Look
game.
out.
So it could be a long march for me if that doesn't go my way.
Well, Matthew, have fun up in Providence with McNeese State. I think Coach Wade is a heck of a coach. I don't think there's any doubt, and he did a good job at LSU. Obviously, some things happened there, but I think he's on his way to getting a better job. If not, stay at McNeese. I mean, he's got a great fan base there. They're winning a lot of games, so might as well be patient. And oh, by the way, before I let you go, how's that Travis Matthew sponsorship going? Have you got it yet?
Right there. So it is in my bio, actively pursuing a Travis Matthew sponsorship with the name Matthew Travis. It's a given. They saw that in my bio about a year ago, and they sent me 4 shirts, pair of jeans, a couple other shirts. I've won giveaways from them in the past just because of my name. And yeah, obviously have to be wearing the Travis Matthew whenever I can.
Well, keep up the good work, my friend. It's great to see you. And hopefully, who knows, maybe our paths will cross. There's a little golf tournament in Augusta, Georgia in about a month after all this basketball is over. Who knows, maybe our paths will cross there.
And I'll be in Hilton Head for the RBC, so maybe I'll see you then.
There you go. All right, buddy. Thank you. Good luck with McNeese.
Thanks, Doug.